Buns and Battles, Doe of the Dragon by yours truly Focus vibes. Sit back and enjoy the story. The sun hadn't yet risen in Urbanville, but inside Sweet Harmony, chaos reigned. A massive blob of dough growing at an alarming rate threatened to take over the entire kitchen. Alex, in a state of panic, tried to wrangle the monstrous dough, their arms and legs flailing comically. "I knew I shouldn't have tried that new super yeast," Alex muttered, regret evident in their voice. Just as it seemed the dough would win, Alex's martial arts instincts kicked in. With a series of swift moves, they began kneading and punching the dough, turning the kitchen into an impromptu dojo. Flour flew in all directions, coating everything in a white haze. It was martial arts meets baking, a dance as old as, well, not very old at all. Finally, after what felt like hours, Alex stood triumphant, the dough now a series of perfectly formed loaves ready for the oven. Breathing heavily, he wiped his brow, leaving a streak of flour across his face. Just then, the bakery's front bell tinkled, signaling the arrival of the first customer of the day. Mrs. Higgins, a regular, walked in, only to stop in shock at the sight before her. The usually pristine bakery looked like a snowstorm had hit it, with flour covering every conceivable surface. And at the center of it all stood Alex, looking like a warrior post-battle, albeit one-armed with a rolling pin. "Oh, Alex," she sighed, shaking her head but with a twinkle in her eye. "Trying to bake the world's largest loaf again, were we?" Alex sheepishly grinned. "Just trying to rise to the occasion, Mrs. Higgins." As she left with her morning bread, chuckling at the bakery's antics, Alex surveyed the mess around him. Life certainly had a way of kneading them into shape, but they wouldn't have it any other way. After Mrs. Higgins left, the day at Sweet Harmony continued in its usual unpredictable manner. The oven, perhaps feeling a bit moody, decided it would randomly change temperatures. At one point, Alex even had to rescue a batch of cookies that were on the brink of becoming charcoal. Then there was the incident with the blueberries, which seemed to vanish every time Alex turned away. The culprit? A cheeky mouse with a love for juicy berries. But the real challenge of the day was the order for the karate unicorn cake. It was a special request, and Alex had promised it would be ready by tomorrow. He sketched out a design that included a unicorn in a flying kick pose, complete with a black belt. It would be a masterpiece if he could pull it off. As the afternoon sun began to set, Alex's dad arrived to take over the evening shift. "You've got your martial arts class, right?" he asked, glancing at the sketch of the karate unicorn cake. "Looks complicated." Alex nodded. "I'll be back later tonight to finish it. Can't let the customer down." With the bakery in his dad's capable hands, Alex made his way to the dojo. The dojo was abuzz with activity when Alex arrived. Fighters paired off, practicing strikes, takedowns, and submissions. Alex was one of the larger participants, and while his size was an advantage in some respects, it also presented its own set of challenges. His coach, Coach Ramirez, shouted over the noise, "Alex, time to work on those submissions. Remember, technique over brute strength." Alex nodded, heading over to the mats. His size, while beneficial in bakery tasks like kneading large amounts of dough, often proved to be a hurdle here. While others moved with swift agility, Alex's movements were more deliberate. Every step, every pivot had to be calculated. During sparring, his sparring partner, a nimble featherweight named Rico, darted around him like a hummingbird. Alex, resembling more of a sturdy oak tree, had to use his wits to anticipate Rico's moves. At one point, as Rico tried to execute a swift armbar, Alex countered with a guillotine choke. But Rico wriggled free, and the two shared a laugh. "You're getting quicker, big guy," Rico teased. Later during boxing drills, Alex's punches were powerful, but his footwork needed finesse. He lumbered around the ring, trying to keep up with the coach's rapid commands. "Jab, cross, duck," Coach Ramirez shouted. Every duck felt like a squat for Alex, his thighs burning with the effort, but he persisted, determined to improve. As the session came to a close, Alex was drenched in sweat, muscles aching, but there was a smile on his face. Every session was a reminder of his journey, the balance between strength and technique, size and agility. And while the road was tough, with every punch and submission, he was finding his rhythm in the dance of MMA. The city lights began to shimmer as the sun dipped below the horizon. Alex, tired but fulfilled, made his way to the metro station. The station was relatively empty, save for a street performer juggling flaming pins, probably against metro regulations, and a couple engrossed in what seemed to be a very animated discussion about the best type of cheese. Finding a seat on the train, Alex settled in and stared out of the window. The city's reflections danced on the glass, blending with his own reflection. He thought about his day, the unruly dough, the near-charred cookies, the sparring session with Rico, and the impending karate unicorn cake challenge. A toddler on the train, spotting Alex's bakery-stained robes, pointed and exclaimed, "Mommy, look! It's a giant marshmallow man!" Alex chuckled, offering the child a playful salute, making the child giggle. As the metro neared his stop, Alex's thoughts turned to the bakery. The late-night baking sessions were his sanctuary. It was a time when the world outside quieted down, and all that mattered was the flour, the frosting, and the fondant. Stepping out of the train, he took a deep breath, feeling the cool evening air. The bakery's lights beckoned in the distance, a beacon in the night. The karate unicorn awaited, and Alex was ready for the challenge. He set his bag down and washed his hands, then went straight to the fridge to retrieve the pre-made cake base. On the counter lay an array of colorful fondants, edible glitters, and other decorating tools. With steady hands, he began crafting the unicorn's body, paying close attention to every detail, from its hooves to its twisted horn. Hours seemed to blur as Alex got lost in his craft. The unicorn, now almost complete, stood in a dynamic karate pose, its hooves raised in a mock kick. The cake was turning out to be one of Alex's best works, a true testament to his dual passions. As the clock struck midnight, Alex, with a tiny brush in hand, painted the finishing touches on the unicorn's eyes, giving it a fierce yet adorable expression. He stepped back, taking a moment to admire his handiwork. A proud smile crept onto his face. The karate unicorn, under the dim bakery lights, looked magnificent. Little did he know the night was far from over. The stillness of the bakery was suddenly interrupted by the soft creak of a floorboard. Alex froze, his heart pounding in his chest. The faint rustling and hushed whispers made it clear. There were intruders inside the bakery. Peeking out from his hiding spot, Alex's eyes widened as he spotted two shadowy figures rifling through the cash register. The realization hit him hard. They were after his parents' hard-earned money. Money that was crucial for keeping the bakery running and their family afloat. Panic threatened to take over, but then Alex's gaze landed on the karate unicorn cake. An idea began to form in his mind. While he knew it was a shame to use the masterpiece in this way, desperate times called for desperate measures. With a regretful whisper, "Sorry, Mr. Unicorn," Alex carefully lifted the cake, preparing to use it as his unexpected weapon of choice. The stage was set for a showdown Alex would never forget. With the weight of the karate unicorn cake in his hands, Alex took a deep breath, bracing himself for the confrontation ahead. As the first robber turned, catching sight of Alex charging towards him, he swung his flashlight in an attempt to strike. Using footwork he'd practiced at the dojo, Alex deftly sidestepped, making the robber stumble slightly. Seizing the moment, Alex lunged forward, smashing the unicorn cake squarely into the robber's face. The cream and frosting acted as a blinding agent, leaving the man disoriented and flailing. With the robber off balance from the cake attack, Alex executed a swift leg sweep, causing the robber to crash onto the floor. The second robber, alarmed by the swift defeat of his partner, lunged at Alex with a wild punch. Alex fluidly passed the attack, spinning to deliver a powerful elbow strike to the robber's head, knocking him back. As the second robber tried to recover, Alex stepped in, delivering a sharp knee strike to his torso. The impact winded the robber, leaving him doubled over and gasping for breath. Seizing the initiative, Alex got close to the first robber, who was trying to rise, and using a technique he'd honed over years, executed a perfect hip throw, sending him crashing outside the bakery. The sight of his partner being thrown out seemed to be the last straw for the second robber, who, clutching his midsection, stumbled away in a hasty retreat. With the door locked behind the defeated robbers, Alex stood in the silent bakery, the aftermath of the confrontation surrounding him. The karate unicorn cake might have been sacrificed, but in its stead stood a baker who had truly risen to the occasion. The adrenaline still coursing through his veins, Alex took a moment to catch his breath. The bakery looked like a battlefield. Flour dusted every surface, cake remnants lay strewn about, and the dim light from the street lamps outside barely illuminated the chaos. The previous serenity of sweet harmony seemed a world away. The only sounds were the soft hum of the refrigerator and Alex's own ragged breathing. He bent down to pick up the scattered baking tools when something caught his eye. A sleek, modern smartphone. It wasn't his. Alex hesitated for a moment before picking it up. To his surprise, there was no passcode. Curiosity piqued, he began to swipe through. The gallery was filled with the usual selfies and candid shots, but as he scrolled further, his eyes widened in surprise. A smirk crept onto his face, replacing the earlier shock and stress. "Well, aren't you full of surprises?" he whispered to the device in his hand. There was something on that phone, something unexpected and intriguing, and while Alex was tempted to explore further, he knew he had to be careful. Setting the phone aside, he couldn't help but chuckle. This night was turning out to be even more eventful than he had imagined. The deep rumble of an approaching car echoed through the empty streets of Urbanville. A sleek, black sedan with tinted windows rolled slowly into view, its powerful engine's purr hinting at the danger it carried within. The neon lights of nearby establishments reflected off its polished surface, giving it an almost spectral appearance. Inside the vehicle, the atmosphere was thick with tension. A group of 4 young gangsters sat in silence, their faces a mix of anger, anticipation, and determination. At the wheel was a burly man with a shaved head, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles turned white. Beside him, in the passenger seat, sat Dylan, the leader of the group. His striking face tattoo, now visible under the car's dim interior lighting, seemed even more menacing. The golden chains around his neck glinted in the sporadic light, and his cold eyes were fixed on the bakery ahead. Dylan broke the silence, his voice low and filled with venom. "That baker thinks he can mess with us. He's got another thing coming." The others nodded in agreement, their expressions hardening even further. As the car pulled up in front of Sweet Harmony, its headlights illuminated the quaint bakery, casting long, ominous shadows on the building. The gentle glow from inside the bakery contrasted sharply with the imposing darkness of the car and its occupants. For a brief moment, everything was still. The only sound was the idling of the car's engine and the distant hum of the city. But that silence was deceptive. The tension in the air was palpable, like the calm before a storm. The gangsters inside the car were preparing for a confrontation, and it was clear they meant business. Little did Alex know the greatest challenge of his night was yet to come. The gangsters emerged from the sedan, each gripping a baseball bat with a menacing intent. As they approached the bakery, the muffled sound of karaoke reached their ears. It was a bizarre juxtaposition, the tense atmosphere outside and the cheerful singing emanating from within the bakery. "Oi, looks like Baker Boy's throwing a party without us," one of the gangsters remarked with a chuckle. "Maybe he's singing for his supper," another quipped, mimicking a dramatic opera note. But while the rest of the gang laughed and cracked jokes, Dylan's face remained stern. The singing, oddly out of place given the circumstances, seemed to unnerve him. "Enough," he snapped, silencing his crew. "Stay here. I'll handle this." With a deep breath, Dylan pushed open the bakery door, disappearing into the dimly lit interior. The gangsters outside exchanged confused glances, their bravado replaced by uncertainty. The singing stopped abruptly, replaced by hushed, indistinct voices. Minutes ticked by, feeling much longer than they actually were. The gangsters outside grew restless, casting anxious glances towards the bakery door and whispering among themselves. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Dylan re-emerged. His face was unreadable, but there was a certain tension in his shoulders. Without a word, he headed back to the sedan. "Boss, what happened? We going in or what?" one of the gangsters asked. Dylan didn't respond immediately. He simply got into the driver's seat, started the car, and then with a glance back at the bakery said, "We're leaving. Now." The gangsters, though puzzled, didn't question him. They quickly piled into the car, and the sedan sped away, leaving behind a quiet bakery and a night full of unanswered questions. The first light of dawn spilled into the bakery, revealing a scene of hasty cleanup, a broom left leaning against a wall, A rag dropped mid-wipe, and the faint outline of where the karate unicorn cake once stood proudly. At the kitchen table, Alex's head rested on folded arms, soft snores escaping his lips, evidence of a night that had stretched on far longer than intended. The door creaked open, revealing a familiar figure. Alex's dad walked in, his eyebrows raised at the sight before him. "Well, someone's been burning the midnight oil," he remarked, nudging Alex gently awake with his foot. Groggy eyes blinked open, squinting at the intrusion of morning light. "Dad? What time is it?" Alex mumbled, rubbing his eyes. "Time for you to get some rest," his father replied with a mix of concern and mild exasperation. "And time for me to figure out where the karate unicorn cake went." He cast a teasing glance at Alex, who could only offer a sheepish smile in return. I got caught up with something," Alex began, but his dad raised a hand, silencing him. "I can see that. Look, son, I know you're trying to do your best for the bakery, but you can't do it all on your own. We're a team, remember?" He paused, giving Alex a soft smile. "And teams look out for each other." Feeling a mix of guilt and gratitude, Alex nodded. "I know, Dad. I wanted to make sure everything was perfect." His father chuckled. "In this business, there's no such thing as perfect. There's only delicious and even more delicious." He winked, lightening the mood. With a laugh, Alex stood up, stretching his tired muscles. "I think I'll head home, get some sleep. Thanks, Dad." As he made his way to the door, there was a newfound determination in his step. Whatever had transpired the night before had ignited a fire within him. A secret resolution, a promise to himself. His journey was only just beginning, and he was ready to face whatever came next with courage, humor, and a sprinkle of mischief. Now, I bet you're curious to know what actually happened between Alex and Dylan, right? Trust me, their story is far from over. If you're intrigued and want to dive deeper into their world, please let me know in the comments or by hitting that like button. Your feedback is incredibly valuable to me. I had a blast putting this illustrated audiobook together, but I'm not sure if there's an audience out there for it. Your interest will be the fuel that drives this story forward. And don't fret, we haven't put any music for a time, but we're gearing back up, and you can expect some fresh focus vibes coming your way soon.